Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today with our sponsor Kimberly, I am going to create a true gradient on 100 grams of Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Weight sock yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. When I dye yarn gradients, I will frequently do yarn cakes, hand wound yarn balls, or even sock blanks to make that gradient. But what if you don't want that sort of modeling resist mark from having the knit blank, and you want something that has a little more semi-solid transition between two colors? So today we are going to wind, I guess, approximately five mini skeins of yarn onto our niddy noddy, and we're going to tie them off separately, put them in mason jars, and dye 5 different colors that we're going to mix so that when we have a gradient transition. I started to do some calculations to see how many wraps of each color I would need to do to get approximately 5 equal sections. When it occurred to me that I should really be doing this by weight, I can wind this into a yarn cake, weigh it, and then wind off 20 grams, tie it up, and repeat. There is no reason for me to make this overcomplicated, right? My yarn cake is 105 grams, but I'm still going to aim for approximately 20 gram sections on the niddy noddy. The reason why I chose a 2-foot niddy noddy is so that way I could wind the yarn around like so. If I was using the traditional perpendicular niddy noddy configuration, it would be harder for me to keep the different minis separate, which I believe I'm able to do here pretty successfully. The sizing of the sections is going to be approximate, and I am going to add a number of ties to each of them before we actually start the dyeing process. You can see I used a removable zip tie just to section this off. And the first one was probably like 23 grams or so. So again, it'll be approximate, but we're going to go ahead and keep winding. The wrapping process is going well, and I think putting the removable zip ties around the entire skein, it really helps me keep them each separate as I am tying them off. So I think that this is just a handy little hack. I don't know. We now have 5 different minis for our sponsor, Kimberly. I am really unsure if I should keep the zip ties as I'm doing this. I think I might, just because I think it might help and be an extra tie. I'll have to loosen them as I put them in the dye pot. But so what I'm doing right now is taking them off the double and then putting them around on just sort of one side to make it more like a tie. But I was really grateful to have these as I did. Now I am going to take this off of the niddy noddy, find our first end, and tie that around. So here we have what should be 5 mini skeins, all sort of connected down at the end with the zip ties. I'm going to go add a few more yarn ties to this. Now I need to pre-soak it. I think it would be easier for me to take these minis and just put them directly into the jars, but I am going to try to pre-soak them all in one vat, and that's why I'm leaving these zip ties on. So hopefully that should keep things from getting tangled. And yes, I keep laughing because I am nervous. We are pre-soaking the yarn in some plain tap water for 20 to 30 minutes. I mixed up 3 1% stock solutions of Dharma acid dyes in radioactive, fluorescent fuchsia, and fluorescent lemon. All of these colors are fluorescent, but looking at them, the difference between the pink and yellow seemed to be the most extreme, so I decided to pick those 2 colors to try to create our gradient and transition. We could do our mixture with calculations And I think that that's still probably what we will do, but I do want to start a little more qualitative. So what we are going to do is we're going to take 10 milliliters of our fuchsia and 10 of our fluorescent lemon to see how this color is. So this is a 1-to-1 mixture of the two colors. Okay, so that is fairly nice. So that's 1-to-1. Okay, in this next container I did 15 milliliters of the yellow and 5 of the pink. And so that is more orangey. So I might like this 3-to-1, I think, as our midpoint sort of orange color. Yeah, before it sort of breaks. That's a good orange. Oh dear. What's interesting is how red that went. Maybe that's fairly good. Here I did 18 pink, and now I am going to add, I think, let's try 5 milliliters of that mixture. Let's do a little more. Let's do 10 of this mixture. It's still quite pink, but you see how that's pink, it's shifted. Okay, I'm gonna add, I think, just like half a mil of yellow here, and we might redo this color or that one. Okay, that is looking sufficiently different. So if we had that, then there, actually that's, I'm pretty happy with that, I think. Was this a perfect math mixing? Not at all. And the reason is that the pink is much more vibrant and pigmented and really overpowers the yellow really, really quickly. And so I had to do a little bit of finagling, but I think that I am really happy with this gradient. We started with 20 milliliters of our 1% stock solution of pink, 20 milliliters of our 1% stock solution of the yellow. Here we've got about a 50-50, 10 of each. And then for these two, I think this is 3-to-1, and this one we mixed around a little bit until we got something we were happy with. Now I want to go ahead and add another half a cup of water to each of these jars. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I'm having some doubts. Right now it looks like yellow and 4 pinks. But I'm gonna add the yarn and then we can adjust the colors as needed. Right? I am now going to carefully add a mini skein to each jar. We might end up wanting some more liquid. Before I started putting the yarn in the jars, I made sure to line them up in the correct order, so that way as I did my gradient, the mini skein would be next to the one it was connected to. And I carefully added them to the jars. Okay. I am now working to mix and also loosen these zip ties. Because I don't really want that to be like a resist point. But we will be able to evaluate our color selection. We will be adding some more water in here as well. Okay, this is really, really pretty. The one issue, the one little standout that doesn't quite work.
I think would be these two a little bit. So here is what we're gonna do. Oh dear. We are gonna pull out this orange. Okay, this is gonna get a little messy. So let's add another 10 milliliters of the yellow. And the goal here is to get something that feels a little distinct from this one right here. Let's make this one a little more pigmented. So I'm going to add another 5 of yellow and 5 of pink. The transition is feeling more gradual, but there is still a little more we could do, because while these 4 are feeling very much like a gradient, our last friend over here is feeling like an additional stripe, and so that's feeling like it is a bigger change. I've got a residual drop of some of the fuchsia and yellow in a jar, stirring the water in, stirring that up. And adding that back in. So we just have a hint of pink. Maybe I should have done the pink and the fluorescent safety orange. Okay, I'm actually going to do a tiny bit more of the pink. Alright, after that messy saga, I'm going to add, I think, another about half cup, maybe a tiny bit less, to each of the jars. Okay, I added the more water, and I'm mixing them each up by carefully raising and lowering the minis. And you can see that the colors that are sort of bridging these jars are getting color from the amount of manipulation that I am doing. Now let's add some vinegar. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of white vinegar to each of the jars. And then we are going to mix it up by sort of raising and lowering the yarn. I placed all 5 jars inside a pasta insert that I am going to set in my steamer basket. We now effectively have a double boiler set up here. But there is one more thing I want to do. I want to pull up all of this intermediate yarn and place it in one jar or another, so that way there's a chance they can get some amount of pigmentation. But I think a lot of clearing already happened while this was sitting on my countertop. Oof. Yeah, look at that. There's a lot of color in this beautiful, beautiful hot pink yarn. Okay. We are heating up the bath around it, and I do want to go ahead and steam set this for, I think for 30 minutes. Let's check in on our yarn. The intermediate regions are looking good. Oh, we got a little spot of orange on there, but that's fine. There's still a little bit of color in there. Let's check our pink. There's still a little bit of color in there as well. Let's go ahead and add some more acid to each of these containers. I'm adding another tablespoon. And let's add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar to each of these colors. I realized my goal was to go for neon colors, but I wasn't aiming for like ultra saturated. I think I was going for more not muted, but I wanted to kind of have like more of a pastel neon was my original goal, and I got a little carried away when I was mixing up the colors. Oop, that's hot. Okay. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and heat this for another 15 minutes. The time is up, and I'm actually going to leave this covered and turn off the heat. This is going to keep some of the heat in here for a while. There should be sufficient acid, but I'm going to let this cool off slowly until everything's at room temperature, so that way we can absorb as much of that color as we can. Let's take a closer look at our yarn. I have another zip tie here that I am going to use to connect. There, I am connecting the 5 skeins in the correct order, which we would be able to tell color-wise. I just really don't want to tangle things, and I think that this will help. But let's remove our yarn, and actually that is pretty good. There's a hint of color in the pink, there's a hint of color, but compared to this sort of day glow neon colorway, that really isn't bad. And I'm going to plop that into some tap water. Now we are going to wash the yarn. It's hard to tell immediately if there's bleeding because there's a little bit of a reflection, but this is so pretty. I am just in love with how these tones came out, and there is a tiny bit of bleeding in here. But now I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of some dish soap, which will probably make the bleeding worse. I want to be completely honest here. But, ooh, I'm so glad that I added this extra zip tie. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's really not bad. There's a little bit of bleeding, but compared to our day glowness, that really is not bad. Not bad at all. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse this a few more times, put it through my spin dryer, and hang it up to dry. And then we're going to start playing with disassembling this back into like one full skein. The color mixing in this video was a bit of a mess, and so I sort of want to do another round. So I created 5 more attached minis in the exact same way, and I'm going to go pre-soak, and we're going to mix colors and set it as well. When I was mixing colors yesterday, I think I forgot that each mini was only 20 grams, and so I used a lot more dye. So starting with the same stocks that we had made yesterday, I'm going to do some dilutions and then set things up again. So in each of these cups I have 150 milliliters of water, and I am going to add 20 milliliters of the concentrated 1% stock solution to these cups, and we're going to use these dilutions to set up our little dye containers. For round 2, I started off with 1/2 a cup of water in each jar, and then I added 10 milliliters of our new diluted stocks of each color into the center jar. In jar 2, we've added 15 milliliters of the pink, 5 milliliters of yellow. Jar 1 was 20 milliliters of our pink. Jar 4 was 15 milliliters of yellow and 5 milliliters in pink. And finally, jar 5 had 20 milliliters of our new yellow dye stock. The concern that I had last time was because all of these middle colors, I was afraid that they were feeling too similar. You can see that we are less pigmented this time. But actually, and you can barely see those colors, it's really not as bad. I think the 3 in the middle look very similar, but when I sort of dip into them, they don't feel as, it feels good. I should have just gone with my initial plan, but then I started messing things around a bit. I am going to go ahead and double the amount of dye that I just put in each of these jars using these dilutions again. This time I didn't even use 20 milliliters of each 1% dye stock total, whereas last time I had 20 milliliters of those 1% dye stocks in each jar, or maybe more, I forget. But either way, we've got a lot less color now, and so let's add the yarn. I was debating adding some more water first, but let's add some yarn. Let's add our yarn. Oh dear. And I am making a total mess again. That's okay, that's what I did last time. I want to get everything completely in. Oh dear. Without making too much of a mess. There probably will be some tonal variation in here, but I think that it should be okay. I am now going to add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar to each of the jars, and then sort of top them off with a little more water. And now carefully, super carefully, raise and lower to mix things up. And sort of tapping those colors in that in-between zone, so we can add some color there as well. But yeah, I am happy with how this looks, and I think that it was a lot more organized way of doing it. We still have very neon bright colors, but the pigmentation is slightly less. And this time, before we go to the double boiler setup, I'm making sure all of these strings are raised up. But, oof, I am excited. Once again, I have my double boiler situation set up. I have the water line. This is a pasta insert. I have the water line just below the tops of the jars. And we are gonna bring the bath water up to a boil and heat it for 30 minutes. Now, if you could definitely do this without having mason jars. Instead of sort of making these and dissolving it in small amounts, you could use the full dye pot and dye one color in the big pot at a time. That's completely a legitimate way to do it. You could do that and then steam set if necessary, if you want to add more time. This allows me to do everything at once, but clearly if I had more than 5 colors, then it would start to be a little difficult because I couldn't fit it all in one pot. So that is just something to keep in mind. Okay, the 30 minutes are up. I'm gonna turn off the heat, and you can see how nice and steamy we are in here. And let's just check. The yellow's looking like it's mostly clear, and the pink is the real question. There's a little bit of pink left in there. Moving all the yarn sort of up and down will help a little bit. But I'm going to leave everything in here in the pot, and I'm actually going to cover it so we can get a little bit of extra heat trapped. I'm going to let this cool slowly over the next day before we come and wash it. Okay, before we take things out to start washing, once again, I do want to sort of connect all of these zip ties together. That way I won't tangle up the order a ton. Things still might need to be shifted or whatnot as I put this on the Nitty Knotty to wind it into one skein, but doing this just makes me feel a little more comfortable. Now let's raise all the yarn out, and it looks like we have cleared everything. I'm gonna pop that in. I'm not expecting to see color bleeding this time, but I am going to go ahead and add some clear dish soap to our wash bath, because sometimes the addition of soap allows the bleeding to start, but I'm really happy with how this came out. I think that the 3 intermediate colors are much more of like a slow transition compared to the absolute brightness of the neons on either end, but I think together it still is really fun. So I'm going to rinse out the soap, put this through my spin dryer, and hang everything up to dry. The yarn is dry in both cases, and whoa, the camera can't really even handle it. Like the more pastel and honestly more neon colors feel blown out. If I look at just the yellows, this looks like fluorescent highlighter yellow, when this looks like a really saturated deep yellow. On Kimberly's more pastel neon sort of gradient here, I would say the yellow and the pink feel totally neon and fluorescent. They feel like a Sharpie highlighter color. These oranges don't quite hit it. They feel more muted overall. I think that the gradient works really well from like the pink to the orange. The yellow sticks out a little bit more. This color mixing is something that I would need to work on more in the future. And I feel, I guess in both cases, that yellow is sort of more of the standout from these colorways. We're not done here. We still have 5 mini skeins on both of these sets. And we need to convert them back, or at least attempt to convert them back into one full skein. But first, while we can still sort of see this color progression, let's go look at it under a black light. I haven't checked this out in a black light yet, so we're gonna look at it together for the first time. Wow! Oh man, you guys. So, under the black light, we can see that neon in our more pigmented skein. And it looks honestly really similar to what we saw not under a black light. And like, I mean, look at my hand for comparison. And you can see it in the more pastel one as well. But, you know, as soon as I turn that light on, bam, I'm drawn to what we see over here on that first one. But fluorescent colors are so much fun. I look forward to playing with these in so many different ways. But let's go and finish up this project. Here is my yarn Swift. Here is Kimberly's yarn. And we are going to cross our fingers. I am going to remove the zip tie that's holding all of them together. Okay, so starting with our little pink skein. Okay, I'm going to take this and place it around the Swift. I do have an automated skein winder. So in theory, I could set this up and then go and use that to unwind it, but I'd worry about the tension getting being a little too much and potentially like snapping the skein after I've worked so hard. Okay, so that is continuing around that way. I'm now going to add our next skein. I'm trying to check to make sure that the yarn from our like intermediate area isn't going to get tangled. I think I did a really good job adding extra ties, and I say this as I feel like the next one might be tangled. Okay, I have to say I am incredibly grateful for all these extra zip ties that I put on. There's still absolutely a chance that things could be a little tangled on here, but I think what I'm going to do as I unravel this is I'm going to do one color at a time and remove the ties from one section at a time, so that way hopefully that'll make things a little easier. Go on this way as well. And it's possible that I'm going to add some of these mini skeins so that way they unravel one way, like with one color, and then another way for the next. That is absolutely possible, but hopefully I didn't do that. So yeah, and I think that ultimately these skeins are pretty small. It probably would have been helpful for me to have wound them a little bit larger, but I'm going to take the ties off the yellow and we're gonna try unraveling. Woo! Whoa, this is going smooth. I'm feeling super optimistic that everything will be super, super easy. Yep, easy street. Cut, cut, cut. All right, we're gonna go on to the next and uh-oh. Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. First color went super smoothly. Second color is not going as smoothly. So let's try to take this off and see if I shift it. Maybe that will improve it. I'm really, really glad in retrospect that I did not remove all of the ties already. Like, okay, so if that's going around like that, let's put you on like this. Okay, and woohoo! Okay, I'm not even winding on to knitting right now. Okay, that's working. So take care with those transitions and shift things around if you need to, but I think I'm just going to continue off camera because it didn't seem to be too exciting. I'll let you know if I hit any other snags though. Eek, Kimberly, here's your yarn! So like I showed, I think about each transition had to like untwist it a little bit so that way it could continue to unravel easily. Ultimately, it was a lot easier than I thought, and I was mega nervous that things would end up being a tangled mess, and it didn't. Let's open this up. I mean, we know what the color progression and sort of that gradient is going to look like. This looks very similar to how we had those mini skeins already, but it's now wound neatly as one skein, so can therefore be going used. And I'm going to go ahead and fix the second one off camera as well, and if I hit any snags there, I will definitely let you know. There's a reason why dyers tend to store their gradients in cakes and not skeins, and that's because when you look at this yarn, you don't immediately look at it and think like, oh, this is like a striping color progression kind of thing. It looks like it could just be a variegated yarn. But ooh, this is so pretty. Honestly, this whole thing felt like it was going to be a lot harder than it actually was. But the place where I had the most challenge was with the actual color mixing itself. In this project, we transitioned between 3 colors, really. Yes, we went from yellow to pink, but we transitioned through an orange. And it might have been easier to get a smooth, full gradient feel if I was just trying to go from, say, pink to orange. Because if I turned the yellow to, if I added some more pink to that yellow that we see, then it would feel a lot more like a gradient, whereas right now the yellow still kind of sticks out. We wouldn't have been able to fit more steps of color in our 5 mason jars on the stovetop unless we did it in 2 batches. So we could have done this with 10 mini skeins, heat set half of them at one point, remove them from the pot, and then heat set the other half. Or maybe put the jars inside one of my catering steam pans to heat them up. So there are ways that you could try to do this with more colors, so that way you could make more of a transitional gradual gradient. Are these skeins gradient? Are they self-striping? Well, certainly the colors stripe. It's not like a true slow transition
there are color changes in between some of the things. And they're definitely asymmetric. So, I don't know, what would you just call this yarn? I'm having trouble sort of classifying it. This might not be exactly what I was hoping to achieve, but it's pretty darn close. And I think that these yarns are fun and exciting. I would like to give a huge shout out and thank you to our sponsor, Kimberly. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video, and I really hope that you will enjoy the yarn as much as I did making it. If you would like to learn more about sponsoring an episode of Dyepot Weekly, where I will create a video with you in mind and you'll get a surprise yarn featured in the video that you sponsored, you can find all the details in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. There will be a link both in the video description and iCard. Whether or not you want to sponsor a video, always reach out to me with suggestions and comments, whether they be colors or techniques. I have a list that keeps on growing of new ideas, and it might take a long time for me to get to every suggestion, but I do add every single suggestion onto this list, so the inspiration for this Dyepot Weekly series can continue to grow and grow. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, turn on notifications by pressing that bell icon on your screen. All of these things really do help me continue to produce this content for all of you. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.